In this video, we're going to talk about why sew-ins have always been my favorite option when it comes to repairing natural hair and certain types of scalp and hair shaft disorders. And today, we're going to break that down. Now, this client that we have here, she dealt with some shedding from having a baby. Now, her child is a little older, but her hair growth cycle was never reset back properly, and everybody didn't want to do a big chop. So this is one of the processes that I would use for my clients that had certain hair shaft and scalp disorders that did not want to do the big chop. So stick around and let's get into it. Before we get started, make sure you go ahead, give this video a thumbs up, and click on that bell notification after you subscribe so you're notified every time I post another video. Now, when you see certain things that look like lines of demarcation, the first thing you think of is heat damage, or the first thing you would want to do is do a big chop. But no, let's break it down, because there's a difference between lines of demarcation from heat damage or breakage and split ends, and from repair. Now, what you will notice is that the density of her hair throughout her roots is a lot thicker than the density on her ends. And what you are looking at right now is how your hair actually grows out of the pore. Now, when I say the average person has 100,000 follicles, and each follicle is coming out of a certain pore, right? And you have 1 to 4 strands per pore. So what happens when your hair starts thinning out, instead of you having 3 to 4 strands per pore, you'll end up having 1 to 2 strands per pore. So the difference in density that you are seeing is not from her having a line of demarcation from split ends, but through the processes that we've used through her installs, we were able to increase the amount of hair follicles that are protruding out of the pore, if that makes sense. The amount of hair fibers, that are protruding out of each pore. Give me some comments if that makes sense. So again, I want you to look at this illustration, and for yourself, if you see that your hair is thicker at the root and thinner at the ends, yes, if you're going to wear your hair straightened and things of that nature, it's going to be really, really obvious. The line of demarcation doesn't look that great. So yeah, you might want to cut it off, but it's really, really imperative that you know the difference between a hair shaft disorder and broken ends. If you had balding and things of that nature in the past, and then those bald spots start to grow out, you will notice what may look like a line of demarcation. This is why it's so imperative to know the human body. What you're looking at right now is the layers of the hair's cuticle, and as I am braiding her hair down, you will notice that I'm not using a whole bunch of products. One of the things that make weaves and extensions damaging is the preparation. Most of the time, you're so afraid of heat tools that you end up giving yourself way more damage than you can ever give it by just simply avoiding the blow dryer, right? Because imagine if I braided her hair when it was, though it's dry, maybe it was just air dried or stretched with the tool instead of just doing it with a blow dryer. Then instead of me just simply braiding her hair easily with a little bit of batter on my fingertips, like emulsify on my fingertips, then what would happen is her hair would be breaking as I'm braiding her hair. But as you can see, it's not breaking at all. Now, the batter that I'm using on her hair, if I never told you that it was there, you would never know. I'm not using it as a hair growth aid, because everyone's hair grows, and what I'm showing you on the screen is not the same woman, actually a different client, but I'm just showing you the way that when you put in a install properly, your hair really, really grows. And if you take it down properly, if you don't leave it in too long, then you will end up maintaining the length. What went wrong with weaves and extensions is people went ahead and linked the amount of money that they paid for hair extensions to the time frame that they leave them in, and that's just simply not the way that it should be. A lot of people wouldn't want to hear this, but even if you spend, let's say, if you spend $200-300 on a sew-in, right? Let's say your normal regimen is getting your hair done every 2 weeks, right? How much money do you spend every 2 weeks? So if you have your hair in the install for no longer than 60 days, which is my recommendation, then you are saving money, retaining length, and you're not in your hair as much. Now, the issue is the products. I can't talk. Products. I was trying to say products and processes at the same time. But the products and the processes that we use, that's what ends up messing us up. Now, this person that you're seeing here, they actually left their weave in a little longer than I would have wanted them to. And even though, yes, they were able to grow hair, was their hair shaft as strong as it could have been? No, it was not, because all of the bacteria was able to build up, right? Even though she was able to maintain length, the strength and integrity of her hair was not enforced because sebum was never able to touch it. We're going to talk about that in a second. I'm warning you guys, this video is going to be a little controversial because when I did extensions and weaves, there is a difference between extensions and weaves, but when I did them, it was for a reason. And we'll get into that in a second because that is a spicy topic. But let's talk about putting oil on the scalp. Most of the time, after you see somebody do a braid down for a sew-in or a wig install, the first thing you see is them grab a bunch of oil and put it on the scalp. I am not doing that. There are over 1,000 different forms of bacteria and yeast on the human scalp, and their favorite food is oil, and their favorite environment is a wet and humid environment. So the very last thing that I'm going to do is put oil on a scalp that is not going to be cleansed on a regular basis, because this colonizing bacteria that you're looking at right now, its favorite food is oil. So for that reason, my clients would always be directed to clean the scalp on a regular basis with either rose water or witch hazel. Stay tuned in the apothecary because in the very next video, we have a brand new product for you guys, witch hazel out of Simple Apothecary, and I'm so excited. But let's talk about weaves and extensions. There is a difference, and the sew-in weaves was created by Christina Jenkins, and this was in 1951 when she got the patent. All right, but let's be very clear and state that weaves and extensions and things of that nature go back to ancient times before Egypt, because remember, Egypt is what the Greeks named Kemet after they conquered it, right? From the people who conquered it before. But in Kemet, they had so many different forms of weaving and extensions, right? But this technique that I'm doing right now was patented by Christina Jenkins in 1951, right? And when you are weaving hair, what you are doing is taking your hair, protecting it, right? Putting it up, laying the cuticles in the way that they're supposed to be laid, making sure that the scalp is clean and clear and free from debris so that the natural hair growth cycle can reset itself, so that the natural skin cell turnover cycle can go head on like it's supposed to, right? And the way that we sew, it makes sure like that the thread is not pulling and tugging on the hair. But the reason that weaves and extensions become damaging is because if you spent a bunch of money on it, you just automatically assume that you're supposed to have it in until it can no longer stay in your head anymore, and that's not true. That's what makes weaves and extensions damaging. Anytime my clients sat in my chair, I would always tell them that I do not recommend them leaving their install in any longer than 60 days. And for me, that was still pushing it a little bit, but if they were going to leave it in for 60 days, they were coming in to see me for regular maintenance, where I cleansed the scalp properly and made sure that there was not an overgrowth of bacteria on their scalp. And certain clients needed hair nets, certain clients did not. If you had a client who is repairing themselves from a follicle infection or anything like that, the last thing you want to do is use a hairnet, because that's going to block oxygen flow. But as you can see, even though yes, she has a sew-in, her scalp still has pure and free oxygen flow, because I did not cover her scalp in grease. I did not put a bunch of oils and butters in her scalp. So there is nothing feeding the natural bacteria and the natural yeast that is on the scalp. Someone asked me, like, oh, well, what are you talking about? What's the difference? Why is it okay for you to put oil and butter on your skin but not your scalp? Well, most people wash their butt every day. Most people get in the shower and wash their butt every day, but most people don't wash their scalp every day. So it's different. You don't allow the bacteria and the yeast that lives on your body to overgrow because you get in the shower. And guess what? When it does overgrow, that's when your booty stank and you like, oh, I'm smelling a little musty. That is the overgrowth of the yeast and bacteria that is coming out of your skin naturally. But for whatever reason, we deduct the importance of removing this yeast and bacteria from the scalp. It lives on the scalp the same way it lives on the body. That's why you can have a funky scalp just like you can have a funky butt. All right. So now, as I am putting this insole in, what I am doing is sewing around her braids, right? And this thread that I am using is not a cotton thread. It is a silk nylon thread, and what it is doing is wrapping around her hair. Now, I have already laid her cuticles in the direction that they go in. Notice that I said laid, not locked, right? I didn't lock her cuticles anywhere. We just laid them flat, right? So that her hair knows that it is meant to be laid flat until this insole is removed. Now, a question that I always get as well is like, oh, well, how does the sebum get to the scalp? Well, I want you to look at this visually real quick. So now my question goes in reverse back to you. What is stopping the sebum that is coming out of her scalp from going directly on her braids? It's not a rhetorical question. And the answer is absolutely nothing. I have not put any oil or butter on her scalp, and her scalp has already been cleaned. She received a OLAPLEX 1 treatment and a scalp detox, right? Because we always do a scalp detox before you get ready to put extensions in your head. And after her scalp detox, her scalp is clean and clear and free, and the sebum can move along as normal. Understand that there is a sebaceous gland within your scalp, and before your hair ever pokes out of the pore, it is covered in sebum. So you don't need to add extra oils. All you adding extra oils to the scalp does is prevent the natural sebum that is already coming out of the follicle every second of every day. You're just limiting it, right? This is why in the 7-day challenge, they're like, oh my God, I cannot believe I used to put all of this oil and stuff in my head. I had sebum the whole time, right? So these are things that I want you to think about. And this is why, for me, a sew-in is one of the best options, because I can properly treat her scalp, I can properly treat her hair shaft, and we can like set it and lock it. I look at sew-ins as like freezing the hair. I'm going to freeze your hair in this position, and we're not going to mess with it until it's time to take this out, and we're going to make sure that there's not an overgrowth of bacteria on the scalp. We're not air drying our weave after we wash it. You have to make sure you set the bonds, because if you allow it to air dry, your hair is weakest when it's wet. And then if you are letting weave dangle on hair that's weakest when wet, or just hair period, then what you end up doing is making it so your protective style is no longer protective. Your hair then ends up holding on and anchoring the extensions instead of the extensions giving your hair a break. I really hope that makes sense. So it is the patterns and the routines that messed everything up. And so this is why sewing weaves with natural parts have always been my favorite. When I was standing behind the chair and everybody started doing frontals, I remember, I'm not even lying, maybe for a good month I did them, and then I completely took it off the menu because I could clearly see how it really interfered with the natural hair growth cycle. And this is why if you really was to go on YouTube and like do the calendar days, it would be so easy to see why and how all of the balding, the receding hairlines, and everything started. Because at the same time that Team Natural took off, wigs and frontals took off. Because most people are not going to want to admit this, but most of our naturals are the same ones that wore the wigs and the frontals. Because when you were tired of doing the twist outs and the wash and goes and all of that, you were like, okay, I'm gonna put a wig on. I'm just gonna put a wig on, and they would have wet hair under the wigs, wet hair under the frontals, and it would just be like, okay, I'm just putting this glue on, I'm gonna put all of this lace glue on, this freeze hold spray, and that was a regular routine. And over time, the blood supply is cut off, right? And this is a fact, right? We know this because anytime someone wears a frontal all the time, you can spot them the second that they have a break. If you say, okay, I'm gonna take a break, but you wear frontals like the majority of the year, let's say 6-7 months out of the year you're in frontals, and then you have 1 week where your hair is out, you can tell you wear frontals all the time because you'll have a tan line, the skin will look different. That is because the oxygen flow is cut off. And so over time, after years and years and years of this, like we talked about previously, you go from 4 hair shafts coming out of one pore to 3 coming out of one pore to 2 coming out of one pore to 1 coming out of one pore to eventually there are no hairs coming out of the pore, and that is where traction alopecia sets in. So this is part 1. This is a whole series that we have. In the very next video that I have coming up, I'm going to give you guys something to repair telogen effluvium, because a lot of you think that you have alopecia and CCCA, but in reality a lot of you just have telogen effluvium. And even though a dermatologist could have gave you that diagnosis, let's be honest, most people don't tell their dermatologist all of the different Team Natural hacks and all of the different things that they've done. So they did the best that they could at giving you a diagnosis with the information that they had. But let's be honest, they don't really have enough information to give you a real diagnosis. And if they did, most of the dermatologists would not be saying CCCA and things of that nature. They would be just saying telogen effluvium, change your patterns, hair will grow back. I'm telling you what I know. So yeah, this is why sew-ins were always such a great option for my clients that listened, that didn't keep the weave in for too long, because it allowed their scalp to rest, it allowed their hair shafts to rest, and it allowed them to keep their hands out of their head. Because a lot of times when the second that your hair gets a little healthy, you think that it's time for you to start busting out blow dries and flat ons and all of that. No. And that's something that I try to tell everyone. My 7-day challenge members, you guys know, I highly recommend getting a sew-in as you are figuring things out. Because most times, as soon as you get any new information, the first thing you want to do is say, okay, I'm about to do it on myself. I'm about to do this on my hair. No. The first thing you do is begin learning. I want you to think about it like this, right? When you go to school, right, before you get your certification, before you get your degrees and stuff, you can't just go out and start operating on people. You can't just go out and start treating people. If you're in pharmacy school, just because you're in school, it doesn't mean that you can now go out and start being a pharmacist. No, you need to practice. So that's the same thing in the 7-day challenge or in anything that you learn. Get a mannequin. If there's nothing that anybody listens to more when I talk, is this: get a mannequin. They have mannequins that have curly hair. Okay, I'm going to leave some links in the description box below. Get a mannequin, and as you learn new things, test it out on the mannequin. And once the mannequin's hair comes out looking like somebody should have paid you $2,500, As soon as the mannequin look like somebody should have paid you 2,400, then you do it on your hair. But stop playing in your hair. Stop doing that. Get a mannequin, all right? And so this is why I really, really recommend you to get a sew-in, because when you have a sew-in, you can say, okay, I'm going to keep this sew-in in for a month. That's what I do. I don't keep my sew-ins longer than 30 days. But let's say you want to do 60 days. You say, okay, I'm going to give myself 60 days to learn everything that I need to know in this 7-day challenge. I'm going to give myself 60 days to get the practice in that I need. I'm going to master this flexi rod set. I'm going to master this perm rod set. I'm going to master these braids. I'm going to, whatever it is that you decide to do to your hair, say, I'm going to master it on this mannequin first. But in the meantime, I'm just going to put my hair up in an install, right? And I'm not saying that this is something that you have to do. I'm giving options. Every time I say, oh, do this, it's like, she trying to say all black women should have weaves. Oh my God. Put your emotions in your pocketbook, baby. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm just letting you know that this is an option that you have. Put your hair up. And one thing that you will notice is I left her perimeter out in the front, because that is one of the last places that we bring it down. And let me just say this. This video is 7 years old, so I have no idea what happened to the footage. But this is the only time you're going to see her front facing. She's so beautiful, isn't she? Oh my God. But her weave came out freaking beautiful. But look at our blend. It came out great, right? And she does not have a whole bunch of pulling and tension. She's not going to have any thinning amongst her temples. Her hairline is not going to thin out at all. So the sensitive areas are still out and not being pulled on and tugged on, right? But at the same time, she still has a regimen. She still understands that she's not pressing that hair out every day. You know, there's a certain way that she ties her hair up. You have to be intentional with your hair. Getting extensions isn't just like, that's it. The weave goes in and now I don't have to worry about my hair. Now I could just leave it in. No, that's not how it works. And I think the big problem again that we had is, you know, it went from sew-ins to lace closures, and I actually really like lace closures. But then from lace closures to frontals, and when frontals hit, it just took away all accountability and all responsibility. And now we're blaming everybody except for us, and we're blaming everybody except for ourselves and our own patterns or the lack thereof for the state of our hair now. And that is where we need to grab hold to some accountability. And this is why, again, when I was behind the chair, this used to be the best option for my clients, because again, they were not in their hair, they were not causing more mechanical damage. As long as they did not have an excessive hair shaft disorder, this was the way to go. Now, because hers was from a follicle disorder that has now repaired itself, this is an option that she could have. But if you are a person who has a really, really severe hair shaft disorder, if you have like massive breakage, a sew-in is not for you, because you're going to take that sew-in out and your breakage is going to be worse than it was before you put it in. If you get a sew-in before you get a trim, you're going to have more breakage when you take the sew-in out than you did before you put it in. And that's just the way that things go. So another thing, when I had clients that needed to get a whole bunch of hair cut off and they just simply did not like the way that they looked with their hair shorter, then we would do weaves. And they would have weaves for as long as it took their hair to get to a length that they were comfortable with. And then once we met their goal, we took the weaves off. It was just as simple as that. And that is where things like micro links came in, right? Because when my clients would get to the point where they say, okay, I'm ready to wear my own hair, if they've been wearing weaves for the last 6 months and they've been getting 4 bundles in, then there is going to be weird if the density of their hair is a little different. So instead of just cold turkeying and going from weaves to just natural hair, we go from weaves to extensions. People want to argue about it. There is a difference between weaves and extensions. When you weave your hair, you braid up all of your natural hair and then you weave in new hair, right? So the method of sewing, crocheting is a version of weaving, right? That's what a sewing and weave is. But when you get extensions, you don't braid up your natural hair. Your natural hair is still out, and you are just extending your natural hair, but the natural hair is still out. You're just extending, making the hair that is already on your head appear longer. And you could do extensions like tape-ins, micro link extensions, fusion I-tip extensions. There are so many different forms of hair extensions, and there are some extensions that are for people with naturally curly hair, and there are some forms of extensions that are simply not. And the truth of the matter is there are only certain routines and patterns that most cosmetologists like myself recommend you to have extensions. A client like her is not, in my opinion, a candidate for hair extensions. Why? The hair that would be out is still damaged. It still needs to be repaired, right? Or I shouldn't say damaged. It's still being repaired. It's still in a weakened state. So the last thing I want to do is add a whole bunch of products to her hair, or the last thing I want to do is layer a bunch of artificial hair on her hair and have it where she'll still be combing through it and still have her hands in it, because that will cause extra breakage. In my opinion, in my professional opinion, with over 15 years in this hair industry, hair extensions are for people with healthy hair. If you do not have healthy hair, you should not be getting extensions. If you have healthy hair and you want to get a weave, you can do that. I'm not saying that healthy hair is only, something that extensions are something that only people with healthy hair can get, and weaves are a thing that people get because their hair is damaged only, and people who get weaves all have damaged hair. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that if your hair is damaged, hair extensions will make them worse. But if your hair is damaged, putting it in a weave with the right patterns and routines will actually cause your hair to be in the type of environment where it can be nursed back to health. Let me know in the comments if it makes sense, because it's really as simple as that. But most of the time, anytime you see a woman, especially a Black woman, get a weave or extensions, it always has to be equated to the way she cares about herself, or whether or not she's confident, or whether or not she loves herself, when in reality, all women get hair extensions for the same reasons. There is a very small percentage of women that get hair extensions because without them they feel ugly, but the majority of women that I serviced were doctors and lawyers and like really successful women, and they were very confident in themselves, but they did not have the time. Because of everything that they did, they didn't have the time to be in their hair with the type of commitment, the way that they wanted to, so they would get extensions. It's just as simple as that, right? Or sometimes their hair was being nursed back to health, and this was the best thing for them to do to keep their hands out of their head. In part 2, I'll give you even more examples, but you guys, the majority of women that get sew-ins have hair longer than the extensions that they're actually putting in their head. And I'm going to have quite a few videos coming soon, flashbacks from the past, showing you some of my clients who did just that. But this is how her hair ended up turning out. We did like a cute body wave. She never kept her weaves in any longer than 60 days. And then she came in to see me every 3 weeks, and every 3 weeks I went ahead and detoxed her scalp and her hair shaft under the weave, all of that jazz. We did a whole thing, right, to make sure that her scalp was clean and clear. And this is why she was always able to retain length, and every time she took the weave out, her hair was thicker. So let me know in the comments if whether or not this video answered your questions, and if whether or not this video made sense to you. because I really want to give you guys more like real life visual examples. This website does not exist anymore, so don't go look at it, but look at the description box below and check out all of the videos that are there, and make sure that you're subscribed here to the channel, because our next video is going to be talking about the herb that will end your telogen effluvium once and for all, because a lot of you just need to heal from telogen effluvium. You don't have CCCA or any of these things that are scaring the life out of everybody. Okay, so again, let me know in the comments what you think about this video, and what do you want to see next. Do you want to see a sew-in with a lace closure, another sew-in with a natural part, or do you want to dive into micro link hair extensions? All right, again, let me know in the comments. Like this video, let me know in the comments. You got to write one. It's really important. And don't forget to subscribe. I love you. Bye.